Okay, so today I'm in SBG Tullamore. I've got Andrew, the King of Hell, Barrett. We're going to run through his career. Obviously, himself, Jordan, and Ronan are all going to the Euros at the end of the month. So we want to just go back to the start of your career. Not even start of your career. Your entry into MMA. Like, how did you come across it? Where did you start, and why?
So my first start out in martial arts, you probably have to go back to what I was like as a kid. I think this is one of the funniest parts about people are always like, oh, MMA is not for me, MMA is for me, I'm sporty, so MMA must be for me, I'm not. I hated sports. The idea of sweating, disgusting. Hard work, I was the laziest person going. But I was smart, and I loved chess, I loved card games. And one day, one of my friends, when I was 12, asked me to go to a karate class. And they started explaining, really simple, everybody knows it. You throw a left hand to fake a right hand, and you distract them with your lead hand. And I came back and I was mesmerized by this. This actually has gamemanship in it. This has tricks to the trade. This is not all just about physicality. And I loved that idea, and I got so attached to karate, and I put more time into it than anybody else. And then I started studying different martial arts. I was kind of like mixed martial arts before I even knew what mixed martial arts was. And I started coming in with techniques that were outside of karate. So I started coming in with sweeps and takedowns and stuff like that. My karate coach is freaking out. He's like, don't do that, that's not karate. And I'd be like, he's on the floor. I achieved the same thing everybody else did. Why didn't that work? That worked for me. And I of course didn't know what MMA was or anything like that. But as more time went on, I started studying different martial arts. I started getting more and more fascinated by all the spectrum of things that you could do. And then one day I bought a UFC game. It was second hand. It was only €5 or something, but it had free fights on it. And one of the free fights was Leo Machida beating Rashad Evans and winning by KO. And he was a karate guy, so I was like, my God, I can do this. He's doing this. And then I started studying more and more and looking at fighters like Carlos Condit and stuff like that. And I was looking at the way they mixed everything together, and the way that there was no restrictions on what you could bring in. It was as simple as, does it work? If it doesn't work, don't use it. If it does work, do use it. I loved that more and more. And I showed the game to my family, and I was like, oh, this is MMA, this is UFC. And they were like, oh, and I was like, it's a fun game, but never do it. That's fucking craziness. Locked in a cage fighting another human being, that's wild. And then the more and more time I started getting more and more frustrated with karate. I was they're not letting me practice different things. I ask a question and they can't respond to me. My coach used to say 80% of fights end on the ground. And I said to him one day, well, if 80% of fights end on the ground, why do we spend 100% of our time training on the feet? And he was like, don't get to the ground. And I said to him, well, if I wasn't going to get to the ground, I wouldn't have even got into the fight in the first place. I would have avoided it. And silly things like that, where it was people weren't willing to say, I actually don't know, Andrew. I'll find that out for you. And then I heard through a friend that her brother was doing MMA, and we traveled down to this gym. We weren't here, but I went into Kieran and I started talking to him about training. And one of the things that stuck with me, one of the first things he ever said to me was that there was no stupid questions. That no matter what I asked about MMA, he would either, one, have an answer for me, or two, he'd say, I don't have an answer for you, but in a week's time, I'll come back to you and I'll have an answer for you. And that really stuck to me. He's had the humbleness to step down and go, I don't actually know. Now, he made a big mistake saying to me, there's no stupid questions, because I had that guy stuck in the gym from all hours of the night, and he was there going, Andrew, I actually really have to go home or my wife's going to think I'm cheating on her or something. I can't keep answering these questions, but I was just obsessed with like learning. And the more time I put into martial arts, the more I realized like MMA really was for me. And before I even stepped foot in the gym, I told my mother that I was going to be a UFC fighter. I was like, I just know it. I know it. I was like, there's enough ordinary people in the world. I'm not one of those people. I'm going to be a UFC fighter. And when I stepped in the gym, I told Kieran straight off the bat, I was like, this is something that I wanted to do. And whatever it was about me, because I was like the nerdiest, tiniest little kid you could ever come across, Kieran was like, believed me. He was like, I think this guy is serious. He's not just talking, and he's willing to put it in. And I was just obsessed with every time I got a chance to come down and train, every time I got a chance to do a little bit. The gym was an hour away from my mother's place. My poor mother driving up and down every day to get me to put that time into me. And like that's another important part of that story is like, you know, it's not just me. There's so many special people in my life that like pieced everything together that actually like brought me to this moment. When I hit 18, I had my first fight, and I had an opponent pull out just like a week before, and I got put in with another opponent. And Kieran it was back Wild West of MMA. People didn't really know who I was being put in against, and turned out after the fight, I lost by TKO. Luckily, the ref seemed to be very aware of like the situations. This was a fight that shouldn't have been made. Yeah. Afterwards, I get told that this guy that I lost to had 4 pro K1 fights. This was my first MMA fight, like first MMA fight ever. He had 4 pro K1 fights, but still, despite all of that, the negative thoughts still ran through my head. I was like, you're thinking you're special, you're not special, this isn't for you, you're not actually a fighter, you just don't have the materials for it, you love martial arts, but you just don't have the backbone for it. And I beat myself down, and I have to say, like, looking back, that's probably one of the things I regret the most is, and if I was to ever tell someone that's coming new to martial arts is, there's a difference between being critical and hating yourself. And hating yourself doesn't lead to any sort of growth. And I put myself down, had the next fight, had a barroom brawl, showed my heart, was able to fight. I thought I won it. I lost the decision again. And again, I beat myself down. I was like, you know, that decision could have gone either way, but I took it as my own fault. It was like, how could that happen? Again, I had another fight, and put in loads of work, dedicated myself, and that fight I can openly say I got robbed in that fight. It was a terrible decision. Like, it's online, you can all go back and watch it. I definitely won that one, but again, still those negative thoughts like jumped back into my head. You're not good enough, you know, you're working as hard as you can't work any harder than you are. You know, I used to come back from training, I'd literally be like shaking, I'd be so exhausted at the end of the week. I had no energy to do anything else. So I was working as hard as possible, but I still wasn't getting those results. And sometimes, especially with the way a fighter is or where heads are, sometimes you start your career, everything runs smoothly. Sometimes you start your career, you don't have maybe the right things line up for you, and everything goes wrong. But I'm so glad I had those moments now. Not just as a growth as a martial artist, as in getting better, but the growth for myself as a person, that I had to be that negative before I could realize to be positive with myself. Yeah. So I had to pull myself down that far, and only now, after years and years of hard work, have things started to like slot together. And I do think this is an important story to tell, because I think a lot of times people have hard starts to their career and they give it up and they go, I'm just not made of whatever stuff such and such a fighter is made of. And that's just not the truth. The truth is, if you give yourself time, you grow, you constantly put the work in, that's will come back to you at the end of the day. So as time has gone on, particularly the last like 2 years or literally since we've opened up from COVID, I've just been on a tear, and I've been going from success to success, and it's all part of the team that we've brought together, but also my own personal growth of stuff I've gone through with Kieran. I've talked to Kieran about throughout the years that Kieran could see that potential in me, but maybe I wasn't realising it. But that's my basic story of how I started and how I fell in love with it.
Just a question. When, like you said, you were beating South Korea, did you, after the third one, did you ever think at one stage, I want to quit? And if you did, what made you change your mind? Or did you think about quitting?
I thought about quitting all the time. I thought about quitting after the first fight. I thought about quitting after the second fight. I thought about quitting after the third fight. I even thought about quitting sometimes after winning. As hard as that is to imagine, I was on a high, and then I would go, is it worth everything that you're doing? Because a fighter's life is the life. It's not, if you pick up a regular job, say you work in a shopping center, you work 8 hours, the rest of those hours are yours. The weekends, they're yours. A fighter's work is 24/7, is the whole way through the week. You eat different because you're training. You sleep different because you're training. Your interactions with people are different. You can't even date the same people other people can date because you can't commit the same kind of time, or the person that you're dating has to understand what you're going through. You can't have as much friends as other people. And part of me is always questioned, was it worth giving up that much, even if I was getting success from it? But I think something that MMA really does bring in is it makes you cut the fat off your life. It makes you cut the things that like you realize aren't important. I think too often we go through our day and it's just, that's okay. When you only have a few moments in your day, you put everything into what you love. You only spend time with the people you really care about, you really love. You don't spend time with people you think are okay, you think are all right. And I actually thank MMA for that. It taught me that lesson that if a job was worth doing, it was worth doing right. If it was worth spending time with someone, it was worth spending all of my time with that person. If it was you were sitting down to a cheat meal, you enjoyed that food more than any other person in the entire world did, because you didn't get it all the time. And sometimes it's the lack of having something that makes you really appreciate something when you do have it. I've always had those questions in the back of my head. Should you continue with it? And to be honest, I don't think those questions are ever going to stop. I think those questions probably should always be there. I think after every fight, I should ask myself, is this worth it? Do I want to continue with it? There's loads of different routes I can take my life, but those special moments after fights are truly incredible. I think this is what we're doing this interview for, is we're trying to distill down what those moments actually mean to other people. Because I think for a person, you watch 9 minutes of a fight and you think that was the 9 minutes, when for me, that's months, that's years of my life distilled down into one moment. And it's a very, very special moment, and a moment that you'll replay in your life. And I said it to Kieran, even about me winning nationals, I said, that moment can never be taken away from me. It exists in history now forever. I'm the first national champion at lightweight, and nobody else can take that away from me. You can't go back, erase it. It's always going to exist. And because of that, every moment I worked up to that was worth it. It was worth doing it for that. That moment is part of my life for the rest of my life.
Yeah, so After the losses, your first win comes, right? So obviously you were down, you wanted to quit, then you went from the lowest lows. Was it the highest highs the next?
Yeah, my first win was at TKO in the Court Hotel. It was actually only a short way away from the gym, so it was home crowded. And I remember I got up, and I always used to think it was like cheesy seeing fighters do it, screaming after fights. So it always used to be like, that's just put on, you're trying to be like the man.
Yeah.
And I screamed, and it was primal. It was a real genuine feeling. It was so much built up emotion. It was finally a moment that wasn't constantly telling me that I was a failure in the sport. I was actually winning, even though later on I would still have those doubts. It was at least one moment I could hang on to that I'd had that success. And but it's funny, it's like not actually the moments inside the fights you actually remember the most. It's the moments just after the fight that like stick with you. You know, like running up to my mother afterwards saying like, we actually won. Like, and I say we because people act like it's just a fighter. It's not just a fighter. You know, we're built by armies of people, and like even if you look at the nationals right now, like we had to raise 7,000 just to go over. It's not government funded, and my people have come together, and we've already raised €5,000. Like every single person, when I go in and I win a fight, has a small part of that win as their win, and I hope people realize that it's not just one person. It's my mother helping me out. It's my coach helping me out. It's my team. It's the people training me. It's the person that put in €2 to get me to that next stage, to that next moment. That's what truly makes it all worthwhile, all that hard work, and that special moment when I do put gold around my neck.
Yeah, and when people, like when obviously you do the fundraising stuff, people always think, I won't put that in, that doesn't seem enough. Like if everyone just put in a €5, €2, like you said,
Exactly.
it would actually build up quicker than the people wanting to put loads in, I think.
100%. I think skip a coffee. Skip one coffee, put your coffee money in just one day to be part of that moment. Don't feel that you have to put in €100. Don't feel that you have to put in 1,000. We don't expect that. We realize that everybody's under pressure. Everybody needs money for something else. But us, it means so much to me as a community that we've like come together and we've raised all this money so far. There's little things we've done. Jordan's been cleaning cars to raise money. We've obviously been jumping in and helping him. We've been doing little fundraisers and asking for sponsors and just reaching out to people that we've obviously touched in conversation, just through interactions with them to help us out with sponsors. But any small amount that people can give really does mean so much. It's small things are all things. So it's not about doing loads for the team. It's about doing anything for the team. You know, we follow that through the way we train. You know, there isn't a detail too small that we can't change to make things better. There isn't the amount of money that would be too small that wouldn't help us go that extra little bit to bring us out there and show not only what me, Ronan and Jordan can do out there, but also what our community can do out there.
Yeah, no, I really like that, and then they'll see going forward. We're going to move on to the IMMAFs later, but I want to talk about, you fought for your first belt, Battle Arena. How did it feel going into a title fight? And just tell me, like, was it different? Did anything feel different in the lead up to that and getting into the cage, or was it just another walk into the cage?
That was a special moment for me. That was a really special moment for me. I remember it was like just after COVID, so I hadn't fought before, And I walked into the changing room and I saw all these fighters around. Leon Edwards was there training and getting ready his fighters. And I actually got so distracted by the atmosphere that I forgot I was fighting. I loved it so much. I started going to Kieran, I missed this. I didn't realize how much I missed this. I missed the tension in the room. I missed every fighter looking at each other thinking that they were going to fight the guy that was beside them, even though there was a 20 kg difference between them and they were never going to fight each other. I missed that energy, and I missed the way I thrived under that pressure. As I started getting warmed up, Kieran noticed that people started pulling away from us. It was like, it was too much. The energy I was giving off was too much for them to even be close to, because I was going in there to take someone's head off. I went into the fight. I was just about to walk out, and I was with Charlie Ward. I was with Kieran. They'd come over to England to help me out, and I could hear them cheering for him. Hometown boy, the music was blaring for him. And Kieran said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to make the entire crowd silent. And I said, you're going to hear two voices. You're going to hear Charlie Ward, you're going to hear Kieran Davern, and you're going to hear nobody else in that room other than those two people. And I went out to that fight. I knew that my opponent, despite having he had a perfect record, he was undefeated. He hadn't fought the way I'd fought before. He hadn't felt what a fight is. And my game plan going out was to let him know, this is a fight. You can hurt me, I can hurt you. This can go anyway. And so I blasted him with a hard kick. He pressured me down. We went through our motions, body lock, went out to the back, got the submission. And again, the gears changed, and I think this is like something that a lot of people don't realize. Once I got that tap, my opponent gave up. My opponent's on the ground. He's so upset. His hands are in his face. And I don't even celebrate. I go over, I put my hand on his back. I said, I'm so sorry. I get up. Again, don't even realize I've won a belt. Doesn't even register in my head. They start bringing out the belt. I start arguing with Kieran. I was like, I wanted him to wear the belt. I didn't want me to wear the belt. And Kieran starts arguing with me. It's funny because back on the video, it actually looks like we're getting out into a full-blown argument in the cage when we're just arguing who's supposed to wear the belt. And anyway, Kieran convinces me to wear the belt. I put it on. Still haven't registered I've won anything. I go back to the back room, and it all hits me, like, all at once. And I started laughing. Like, I just couldn't believe that moment happened for me, that I had a belt around my waist, that I won that fight, that I was back to fighting, that I had won in a dominant fashion in the way that I should win fights, the way that my hard work should come out. And I was so excited, and I rang my girlfriend. I love her, and I rang her, and I just couldn't get words out of my mouth. Once I was done calling her, I rang my mother. I rang Ronan, rang Jordan. I was talking to them, laughing, couldn't believe it. And then I saw my opponent, and I went over to him, and I pulled myself out of it. I was like, I know what it's like to lose. I don't want this to be about me right now. And I went over to him and I said, I'm so delighted you're upset. And I said, I know that sounds like a very strange thing to say to a fighter, but I said, if you weren't upset right now that you lost, I knew you didn't try. I knew that you didn't put any work into it. The only people that are devastated by losing fights are the people that put their heart and soul into it. If you don't put your heart and soul into your fights, you're not going to be affected by these things. So I said, I'm delighted you were upset because that means that I beat a fantastic fighter. And I can't wait to see the things you do. after this. And he's had a very good amateur career since then, picking up a lot of good wins. But like that moment in encapsulation was so special for me, because again, it was that moment where it was like, I am what I say I am. I say that I'm a world champion. I am a world champion. I've earned that belt. I beat an undefeated fighter. I didn't beat a bum to earn the belt, and that's why that belt's so meaningful to me. Even though it's just a belt, you know, you could give me anything. It could mean the same thing, but it means so much to me because it represents that day more than what it actually is.
Yeah, I really like that story, actually. When we move on in your career then, you've obviously went to the Nationals. Run through what it was like winning that, because it was the first time it was run. Like you said, you're the first in history to win it. Like, talk us through the little process for the few days, because obviously you would have had to make weight every day, like the IMMAF. So obviously that's a good practice going forward. So just talk us through the Nationals.
Yeah, so I think I did an interview with you just before it. I said that I was ready for 27 minutes of hell, and that was something that I kept repeating in my mind. There's a tendency with people give up just when they think the finish line is there. If I told you that we had to do an exercise for 3 minutes, you'd push through for those 3 minutes, but if it turned out that it was actually 3 minutes, 20 seconds, those last 20 seconds would hurt you more than anything. If I told you we had to do the same exercise, but I told you we had to do it for 4 minutes, you'd do the 4 minutes fine. It's thinking the fight's gonna go a little bit longer than it should. That's what breaks a lot of people. And I think that's why you see a lot of fighters, they go out and they're like, I'm gonna knock him out, I'm gonna finish him, I'm gonna win in 1 round, I'm gonna win. And I've had loads of 1 round finishes. But then when it doesn't happen, that's when it starts affecting a fighter's mind. And that's why I said 27 minutes of hell, is I went into that whole competition expecting every fight to be a dog fight. I expected every opponent I had to fight not to have to fight the day before, that I was the only one fighting, and that every single day I was going to have to fight a harder and harder opponent. And when I went in with that mindset, nothing could affect me, nothing could harm me, because I was expecting the worst from the get-go, but I was still going to win. Going into the first day, made weight perfectly. Shane, obviously from Combat Lab, had me like on point for making weight. He made everything very easy. He had me dialed in on what I should be taking. I went in on the first day, weighed in, got ready, got warmed up, and I took my opponent out in the first round by TKO. In the fight, I was just listening to instructions from Kieran, going through the motions. I heard Kieran say to me 30 seconds, and I was like, this is not going to a second round. I'm done with this. And I locked up that finish just before the bell went. So it was as close to you can have to a perfect fight. But what people don't realize is, even if you win in dominant fashion in a fight, you still come out with scrapes and bruises and bangs. And my right hand was actually quite bruised up. My right knuckle was quite swollen and sore, and it was actually quite hard to like put in a hand wrap. The next day, despite the fact I had that dominant win. Next day I went in, same thing, dialed in, ready to go. After wins, you'll notice this with me, there'll be no excitement, there'll be no cheering, putting my hands up until the last fight. The last fight I can appreciate the moment, but first fight, I almost looked disappointed. 1 round, okay, on to the next day. We went in the next day, made weight perfectly, really nice and easy, and I was up against Frank. Frank is a tough piece of work. That man, he's a mean fighter, and he was one of those people that would not go away no matter how hard I tried. He came out straight away. He hit me with some uppercuts from the collar tie, caught me a bit by surprise. Again, I've experienced all these things before. Because of my up and down career, I know bad, I know good. These are all things are not new to me. So I stayed nice and relaxed. I shot underneath one of his kicks. I started getting my wrestling going. I took his back, locked up the rear naked choke, and I could literally hear him gargling like he was like half unconscious on his feet. But again, fair play to him, as tough as nails, he gritted it out. We go on to the next round, very same thing, tough, hard fight. I'm pushing him, working for those takedowns, and then it goes to the third round, and Kieran comes up to me and he goes, "Do you have one more round in you?" And I said to him, "This isn't as hard as going with Ronan Deacon. This isn't as hard as going with Jordan Scully." And that's no disrespect to Frank. That's me saying my team is on a different level. The way they push me is completely different than other fighters. Getting up in the morning to spar on a Tuesday morning is one of the most terrifying things I do in a week. I know that if I feel a little bit sick, a little bit tired, I'm a little bit run down from the week before, the boys are going to smell it. They're going to smell it. They know what's up, and they're going to hunt me like prey animals. And I'm going to do the same thing to them, and they're terrified as me as I'm terrified of them. We don't hurt each other in training, but we push each other in training. And honestly, that's scarier than hurting each other. That push where your lungs are on fire and you still have to drag through and you have to give everything. To do that every week is so hard. So when I got to that last moment in the Frank fight, I was like, this is easy. Let's go again. Let's go another 2 rounds. No problem. I do 8 rounds in the gym. And I don't do 8 rounds like other people do 8 rounds. I don't do 8 play sparring rounds where I go with one guy and I go with another guy and we mess around a bit. I go with 8 hard rounds where my team push me. And I never win all the rounds. Ronan never wins all the rounds. Jordan never wins all the rounds. We always lose some of the rounds, and we're always annoyed the next week. How did I lose those rounds? I need to take that back. That push is so important. So when I won that fight, I went home. Kieran drove me home. And it's a funny feeling going to bed, beat up, knowing that there's another killer on the other side waiting to fight you the next day. And it was Solomon, like of all people, like someone I've looked up to for a long time. I've saw him as this like incredible killer in the sport, you know, a real veteran, a real fighter, not someone who talks shit and who just gets down to business and puts the work in. And I knew I was fighting him the next day. No fault to Solomon, but Solomon didn't have to fight the first day. His opponent pulled out on him. That's not a fault to Solomon, but to be honest, I was delighted with it. I said to Kieran when I heard Solomon's opponent pulled out, I was like, great. There will be no excuses when this competition is done. I had the hardest route to the end. I had the hardest fights. I had the toughest fights. I had to push through the most, and I still came out the winner. So I remember going into the bathroom, looking in the mirror, seeing my 2 swollen black eyes. My stomach was so upset from the adrenaline that I couldn't even put food down. And I was still eerily calm. I don't know what it was that I just knew. I'd put in enough work. I'd trained hard enough. I was going to figure out a way to win. Another great moment from the Nationals was they made us warm up beside each other. And I loved that even more. I was like, he gets to see everything I'm doing. I get to see everything he's doing. We know we're going to go out and hurt each other. But it doesn't matter if you know what I'm going to do. You can't stop it because I'm too well put together. I'm too well trained. I'm trained by the best. I train with the best. I sat down after I was warmed up. Kieran stood in front of me and he asked me, "What are you going to do?" And I said to him, I'm willing like to do anything in that fight to get the win. I'm willing to, if he knocks me out, I'm okay with that. If he breaks my limbs, I'm okay with that. If he tears the flesh off my face, I'm okay with that. If I give up in this fight, I'm not okay with that. That was the only thing I'm not okay with. The only thing. If he kills me, I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay with giving up. That feeling of giving up, that moment, because I've given up before, I could never let myself feel that again. So I went in there and I put on, at the time, the performance of a lifetime. I look back at it now and I'm a bit embarrassed about some of the mistakes I made in the fight, but I put on a special fight, and a fight that I think represents the art of mixed martial arts, which is art is emotion. There's no way you don't watch Solomon versus Andrew Barrett and you don't feel something. There's no way something doesn't stir up inside your chest, just a little bit. No matter who you are, you don't go, "I felt something watching that." You know, there's loads of fights you can watch. You could have them in the background while you're on your phone and you wouldn't notice them. You watch this fight, you're going to feel something. There's moments in that fight where I point to the floor, I'm defiant against my losses. 2 black eyes. I'm a mess of a fighter. I'm already damaged before I even start the fight, and I keep a pace from the whole 9 minutes. I work and I work and I work, and I wasn't willing to take my foot off the pedal until the fight was done. That is actually how the name came together, the King of Hell. In the fight, I pointed to the floor. I told Solomon that he was not the king, that I was the king. And then after me talking about 27 minutes of hell, I just said after the fight, "I'm the King of Hell." It was in that moment. It was not the nickname I was planning on keeping, but that was a lot of what media started calling me afterwards. And I like that more. Rather than choosing something, have something naturally come together. And the King of Hell is not like, it's not something that's to intimidate my opponents, to scare them, to impress them. It's to say that I'm a normal man. I bleed, I hurt, I've gone through so much, but I grit through everything. I grit through everything. I represent the person that's working that, 9 to 5 job to keep his family going. I'm that person. I'm that person that no matter how much I get beaten down, I still come back. I still come back. That was a very special moment for me, because that was, in my opinion, the moment I realized I was that good. And after the fight, I went over to Solomon and I said to him, that was all gamesmanship. I hope you realize that. I have so much respect for you, and I really do mean that. I looked up to Solomon. I thought Solomon was like a superhero. I thought he was a fucking fantastic fighter. And it was an honor to step in and fight him. And it was an honor to step in and fight him on that stage. It would have been a shame if we were fighting on some undercard in the middle of nowhere with no prestige to the moment. The fact that me and him had to fight our way up through a tournament, we had to meet in the finals for the first national lightweight gold medal, that means so much to me that it was put on that stage.
Okay, so obviously you became double champ. Tell us what that feeling was like, and tell us what it's like to fight a cage conflict.
Cage conflict was a funny one. Again, like, people look at 9 minutes, they think that that's the fight. For me, that wasn't the fight. For me, the fight was that I had 5 pull-outs up until this point. I went through camp after camp after camp. I accepted every fight they put in front of me. I said yes to everything that they put in front of me. And everybody pulled out I'll be honest, for silly reasons. There were obviously fighters with really legitimate reasons. I'm not trying to throw everybody under the bus, but there were some fighters that literally pulled out for no reason at all. Not because they were injured, just because it didn't suit them that day that they were taking the fight. And honestly, I have no respect for that. The build up to that fight for that cage conflict belt, I was fighting an undefeated fighter again. That's my history making belts, is I fight undefeated fighters for them. I fought an undefeated fighter, an incredible wrestler with incredible pace and pressure. I did not spar, I did not do strength and conditioning, I did not train for that camp whatsoever. I was sick every day coming up to that. I was sick for the week making the weight cut, but I pretended to myself I wasn't. I told myself I wasn't sick at all. I didn't feel bad. I was 100%. Kieran asked me, he's like, do you still want to take the fight? Like, you haven't been into training. And it wasn't because he doubted me, he just wanted to know where my head was. And I said, without a doubt, 100%, I want this fight because I want to show to everybody that Andrew, on half a leg, half alive, without any training, without any preparation, can scrape himself together, come in against an undefeated fighter for the cage conflict belt, and still come out with the win. And that every fighter that pulled out for no apparent reason, because it didn't suit them that day, or they didn't have their favorite pair of underwear on, or they didn't have their favorite meal in the morning, that those fighters would feel embarrassed for making those decisions, because that's not what a fighter does. I'm not saying that a fighter pulling out, sometimes there's a reason to pull out, but I think there's a small number of real fighters in this country. They do exist. I fought a lot of them. I have a lot of respect for the ones that I have fought. But for those who are pulling out for no reason, I have no respect for those people. If you want to fight, you're coming in for the right reasons. Winning that belt, more than the performance, was more that I pushed through stuff that nobody else could push through. That I was prepared in a way that nobody else was prepared for, because I had had it the hard way up. So this was just another challenge on the long list of things. It wasn't even the opponent in front of me. So I gave him his first loss in his record. I collected the cage conflict belt. And again, like, I almost passed out after the fight. I was so exhausted from it. I was still sick. I was still sick days after the fight. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered to me was that I got through it despite that. And honestly, I'm glad that I was sick for the fight, because if I wasn't, I don't think that moment would have meant as much to me.
Because the adversity actually had to come over. So that was another one. So you got 2 belts, and now after that, you're going forward, you're going to the IMMAFs, you're going to the Euros. How does it make you feel to go out and be representing the country with 2 of your teammates, and then with the rest of the team, because the whole squad is fantastic going out there?
Yeah, no, it's an incredible group going over. CMAC have been down training with us the last while. Honestly, it was probably nearly the entire Irish team, or at least half the Irish team were on the mats. And we got a chance to work with some great fighters from their place. That moment of like going out there and getting to represent our country is such a special moment for me, because again, I want to represent what we're doing here on a global stage. I want to let everybody know that not just Ireland, but Tullamore, but my small group can do world-class things on a world-class level. And I'm going to act like that when I go out and fight. If you've watched my last few opponents, I fought every stylistic opponent you could put in front of me. I fought the wrestler, I fought the striker, I fought the submission specialist. And generally speaking, I've outstruck the striker, I've submitted the submission specialist, I've out-wrestled the wrestler. I've beaten people in their strength, and that is all to lead up and prepare me for this moment to collect that gold medal.
Yeah, we can't wait to go and watch you, or wait until you go over so we can watch you going over there. I'm just going to finish up with like 2 questions. One, what does Kieran Davern mean to you?
I think to sum up in a small way, like the reason why I chose to stay with Kieran, the reason why I chose to train with him is, I won't name names, but my first ever MMA fight card I ever went to, there was a very like high level coach, a coach that everybody would have wanted to train with at the time. And I had my eyes glued on him. I was like, oh, what is he going to do when they go out and fight? And they went out and fought, and his fighter got knocked out unconscious. And he strolled in almost like it was nothing. Like, he was so okay with it. It was honestly a little bit disturbing for me. I was like, is that normal? Is it normal to be okay with your fighter getting knocked out? And I remember myself questioning myself. I was like, do you know, I get we can get knocked out in this sport, but surely your people would care about you enough that they'd be upset about it. And then later on that card, our fighters had a few wins, and then one of our fighters was winning the fight. He got clipped with an overhand right, he got stumbled, dropped, and it was called a TKO. And Kieran stepped in the cage and he was devastated, heartbroken. And I could literally hear him saying across the room, I'm so sorry, I didn't do enough for you. That's the coach I have behind me. And that's the reason why I choose him as my coach, is not because of his technical knowledge, which is incredible. It's not because of the preparation we do, which is incredible. It's the fact that he genuinely cares about the people that put time in here. If you don't put any time in training, you're just another person. If you put hard work and dedication in this gym, you're going to be treated like family in here. Every time I've suffered a loss, Kieran has been as devastated as I am. After my last loss, Kieran went back. He stayed up all night rewatching the fight to try to fix the problems. After my last loss, Jordan and Ronan kept asking themselves what they did wrong, what they could have got me closer to that win. After my last loss, Shane changed around strength and conditioning to try to modify it to do anything he heard that I had a problem with in the fight, me tiring in a certain way, he changed it around to get me that bit closer to the win. That's the kind of team we have around us, where when one of us lose, we all feel it. But when one of us win, every single one of us feel it. And I'm only naming a few of the people in the gym that are like that. But honestly, that atmosphere, that feeling runs throughout the gym, through more than just Kieran, because he's cultivated that culture inside the gym.
Yeah, that's excellent. You seem like such a good team here. You're so together. I've been here twice now, and I've seen you all at shows anyways, and you get that vibe from you. Last question: if you want to be remembered, or how would you like to be remembered as once you finish fighting? Well, it doesn't have to be a word; it could be a phrase, or
how I'd like to be remembered after I'm done fighting. Honestly, I don't think has anything directly to do with fighting. I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is I want to be remembered as someone who inspired others to push through their hardships in life. When they were down on one knee, that they went, I've been with Andrew that whole time. I've seen Andrew push through what they might think is harder. Their situation might be harder, but if they just have that inspiration for me for that moment, that they can push through whatever they're going through their life, I want that to be the thing that I'm remembered for.
Perfect. I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It was lovely chatting to you.
Thank you.